Most Americans have three fears when it comes to immigration. Those fears revolve around culture, security, and the economy. From a security perspective, the question is, are immigrants here to do harm, or are they here to protect American values and American interests? More and more these days, there is a perception that immigrants are here to do harm.
The narrative of the undocumented population recently has been those of criminals or those coming to do harm. That's not a true assumption about the undocumented population. And in many cases, it's individuals who are just coming here to work and look for a better system of life.
Unfortunately, there are bad actors in any group, and that includes the undocumented. The truth is that if we were to take that route and say, well, then we don't want any of these undocumented, we as Americans would actually be losing out on a whole lot more. What we have to do is be better at figuring out who we actually would want here and who we don't want here.
Public safety is essentially the ability of the police to ensure that all the citizens of a particular community are safe.
The very foundation of policing is to protect everyone and to serve everyone. Everyone means just that, right? Everyone. The documented, the undocumented, everyone that is in our city. So we cannot overlook or pretend that a certain segment, in this case, the undocumented, are not there.
But having 11 million people who are here without status creates a lot of tension in this idea of law and order. And you see that in a lot of the media that will focus on individual crimes and calling out this was done by an immigrant or even an undocumented immigrant. But when you look at the data and you look what's happening, immigrants have a very different relationship with crime, in part because immigrants are far less likely to commit crimes, especially undocumented immigrants who are worried about their status, but also because immigrants tend to go in places where housing is cheap. And where housing is cheapest is in neighborhoods that have been abandoned or are in bad shape.
And crime is often a much bigger problem in poor urban communities. So I think people have really linked the concepts. But that correlation just isn't there.
If the undocumented immigrant community was committing a disproportionate amount of crime, we would have seen crime numbers grow at the same rate or a similar rate. Instead, as the undocumented immigrant community has grown, you've seen violent crime in particular drop.
And actually, there's a disincentive in the structure of being an undocumented person that means that they're less likely to go out and commit a crime. Because if you're undocumented, your biggest goal is to make enough money for your family to survive. And so you're going to try and stay out of trouble.
Now, that's not to say that there aren't bad actors amongst immigrants, and including undocumented immigrants. There's bad actors in any sort of population group. What's sad here is that because of the system, the way it's designed, commingles all of the good and bad actors in one kind of pocket. And inherently, there's this perception that if you're living in the shadows, it's because you're doing something wrong. You're doing something bad. You're up to no good.
For a long time now, the federal government, in its intent to deter undocumented immigration to the United States, has wanted to deputize the local authorities as immigration agents, that they be able to ask an individual whether they're here with or without papers. I think that's a very bad idea because that's not their job.
And to be clear, even if there were information indicating that a crime had occurred, an unlawful entry or re-entry into the United States, it would not be local police who should be involved in the investigation or detention in that case. It would be federal authorities because these are federal criminal laws, and our system is set up such that we make a sharp distinction between federal activities and state activities.
It's important for us in policing to work with our federal partners, our state and federal partners. It's an important part of what we do. But we have different roles. Our role in policing is not to find out if someone's documented or not. That's not acting in the best interest of community. Everything we do is built around the foundation of trust. And when there's no trust or little trust, or even worse, fear, it really hurts the entire community.
When we have law enforcement who are acting as ICE agents or carrying out enforcement functions, local immigrant communities are less likely to trust the law enforcement in their communities. This means that they might be less willing to report crimes or act as witnesses in cases of crimes. And we have seen that play out in municipalities and localities across the country.
There are tons of stories about women in this country who are undocumented, who are raped or taken advantage of. Or there may be situations where they're not paid correctly, or certain things are taken from them over and over again and never reported, because the concern is that upon reporting it, they will be deported. So when the police and the community, whether they be immigrants or Americans, aren't in sync with regards to what the role a police officer has in that community, it breaks down the justice of our system and erodes what we call justice. So therefore, crime then pervades.
I think that's a tension that communities are dealing with, saying, look, we want to be a place where we enforce the laws, but we also want to be a place where we're safe. If you want to have a safe community, you need one where police have trust in the community, where people are willing to talk to police, where they have relationships. And that becomes harder to do if they're seen as immigration enforcement agencies.
I would hate to think that something is going on in my city and us not knowing about it because they're fearful of coming to us and saying, this is what's going on. That's not good for not only the ones being victimized, but the entire community.
We need to transform our enforcement system. Right now, it destabilizes communities. It leads to the separation of families. It actually hurts local economies. It is not based on safety. It is based on an outdated assumption of thinking of immigrants as inherently bad. The reality is that immigrants have always been part of our communities. Immigration is a vital part and central part of the American story and history. It always has been.
The one other thing that's changing dramatically is where immigrants are. Immigrants traditionally move to gateway cities. They've moved to places, you think about the New Yorks, Texas, California. But when you look at the places that are having the biggest change in immigration in this country, it's places in the Southeast, it's Arkansas, Georgia, Tennessee. Immigration is now an issue in every community. And you're seeing communities begin to make it part of their strategic plan, knowing that if you start having immigrants move in, that's going to be tense. So how do you plan for that?
Around the country, law enforcement officials, sheriffs, heads of police have come out and have said, we need to have our community policing model, our connection with community work, even in immigrant communities, for the benefit of those communities and for the benefit of society at large.
When the police department goes out of their way and goes to them and say, we're here, we want to hear from you, and we're here to help you, it's amazing how much they open up and how much they appreciate it. They want a better life like you do. They want to be educated. They want their kids to be educated. They want their kids to add value in the ways that you want to add value, that your kids want to add value. When you engage them and really have conversations and really get to know them, you'll see that they want to add value to the cities that they live in.
The truth is, if you ask one-on-one, people who know immigrants, even if they're undocumented, will tell you success story after success story. These are our neighbors. These are people that we go to church with, people who our children play with at schools. These are people we want in our communities, by and large. But what we need to figure out is, how do we make sure that they don't have to live in the shadows? Nobody wants that, right? Not the immigrant and not us as a country. But we've got to be better at fixing that problem. And I think in that case, then we would be better at hopefully being able to determine as best we can, who are some of those who do want to come and commit crimes? Who are those who are here for bad intentions? Ideally, we'd be able to keep them out without losing those that actually are here to contribute.
The most important thing for people to sort of challenge themselves to understand is, who is it that walked 1,000 miles for an opportunity to just work in a meat factory? Who is it that flew in and graduated top of their class, couldn't get a work visa, and decided to overstay their visa to add to our society? Who are those individuals, and what would you do in that situation? The right to life and liberty is something that we hold very dear in our Constitution, so we should have a sort of empathetic understanding of what those individuals might need to do. It doesn't mean that every individual needs to stay or has the right to stay, but the understanding that they have the opportunity to stay is a very different conversation.
I don't know what the answers are as far as immigration reform. I can tell you this though, nothing's getting done. We have to do something, whether it be ID and tax or some kind of a work visa and earned pathway. The sooner we get something done, the sooner we will all feel safer and all of our quality of lives will be better.